Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us here at Earth and Sky. Those of you joining us on live, we really appreciate each and every one of you for joining us on YouTube or Facebook. And I'm just going to go ahead and dive right into it. So today we are talking about full dive on Judgment. And we are going
full dive on Judgment.
Full dive on
Judgment. Is that like
Judgment.
deep dive on Judgment?
It would be a dive if we were judging, because we want to keep ourselves up here.
We're going to play in the shallow end, is what you're saying.
Right.
Okay.
Instead of playing in the shallow end or diving
This
deep with
this analogy
judgment.
is just falling apart. So,
We want to talk about why we should not judge, why we do even judge. Sometimes people have worked really hard to stop judging, but they get that flash of judgment that maybe you're just struggling with that. You just want to get rid of that flash of judgment so you can know how to just feel like we're all one, to completely be able to release that judgment. That can be kind of hard because humans are hardwired with an ego. That's part of the thing with being in the realm of the first heaven.
Yeah.
We all have egos. Second heaven all has egos too.
Yep.
Starting to release it a little better there. But part of the thing with the ego is it just likes to hold on to a couple things. One, it likes to be right. And two, sometimes people can feel like they're being right when they're judging others. Because if you're judging somebody, then you're feeling like you're maybe a little superior and they're wrong, which plays right into that same concept. Well, just speaking of, not saying that you don't think so, what was with your shirt today?
oh, my shirt. So, if I want to change something, I always have to turn on this kind of rebellious side in myself. And so this is one of my rebellion shirts. It's to remind myself that you put that rebellion out there and it's like, I'm going to change something. And so that's my, like Braveheart. Freedom! Sorry. It's horrible.
That's actually an interesting concept because sometimes growth and sometimes change are hard. And
Change is very hard.
So
especially
if you have
personal
to trick yourself,
change
absolutely,
is so
because
hard.
we're hardwired.
Yeah.
That goes right back into the ego too,
Yeah.
because if you feel like there's something wrong with you, then, or something needs to change, you feel like there's something wrong, which the ego doesn't like that. The ego wants to think it's all good right here.
This is perfect every day.
So sometimes we need to figure out how to trick our brains into making the changes that we need to make.
Yeah.
When you refrain from judgment and you choose compassion and only judge favorably, you activate your own system of grace. You become a conduit for peace and understanding and happiness. And from a place of gratitude, our hearts begin to soften. Part of this is figuring out a routine, retraining the brain in how to think and how to release judgment. And within that, our hearts begin to soften. Compassion becomes a natural way of being. And through our compassionate connection with others, we generate a collective strength that then creates miracles. Make space in your heart for empathy, and that's going to help you a long way on releasing judgment. I mean, that just feels like that's the heart, that's the core.
Yeah, it is. That's true. Well, and so if we want to, back that up a tiny bit. But so in that, it's true that when you come from a place of open compassion, your initial instincts when you see someone is not what's wrong with them, how am I better than them, how am I right over them, how are they them and I'm the us part. Physiologically, let's start with just the brain. So the brain is wired to, the reason we can do so much with so little, the brain in and of itself, it uses no more than a light bulb worth of electricity to run. And we do all these amazing things, this logic and the emotions and all of the things we do. And the reason it can do all of that is because it takes everything we do and it learns how to make a shortcut out of it. Mm-hmm. And so every time you go to process a moment in time, your brain doesn't relearn all of the stuff that has to do with it. And so because of that, the brain, we put together memories that are based on all different kinds of cues, one of the big ones being an emotional state. Mm-hmm. And so as we're growing up, whether it's we're sitting with friends and you hear somebody say some random thing about somebody, or you're with your parents and your parents have, those people, because, they're your parents, so they would know, that, these people have a tendency to be like this. And whenever you go, if you go across the border, what you're going to find is these people are like that. Things like that. You get these general, people make these statements, and your brain has nothing else to do with them except it's going to store them because that's what we do, but it stores them in this default. And now you actually have to unlearn that. And as anybody knows, unlearning, that's a very hard thing. But so when you walk into a situation, your brain doesn't, even when you try and take all of the negative out of it, your brain still wants to, has to, shortcut things. And one of those things is, who is this person? And it starts to make generalized concepts to apply into it. Like when you walk into a room, if you walk into a room, your brain immediately thinks there's probably going to be, by default, there's probably going to be a window, some doors, and some walls. If you walk in and there's suddenly an entire area, no walls, that goes straight outside and it's from the inside of a house, you'll stop because your brain goes, I was expecting something else. And that's that shortcut. And until you break that, your brain goes, this is what, and it's going to do that over and over again.
Which is the nope, not today, that you were
That's
talking
right.
about.
Nope,
finding a way to
not today.
feel a little rebellious in your
Yes,
thinking and tell
yes.
your brain, no, we're not doing this anymore, not today.
Yeah, so it's that. So what you're doing, so if you want to not judge, the first thing you have to understand is the judging comes from a default state of just shortcutting everything. Your brain shortcuts your visual approach to things, it shortcuts your memories, it shortcuts, all of that is a shortcut. And so what you're going to do is you need to relearn, how do I not take the negatives, if we're going to go that direction, like the negative, because the negative judgments are usually the ones that you would care the most
That's what
about.
people think about first when you think
Usually,
about the
right?
word. We'll go into the positive judgments too, and if that's okay or if that's not okay
Yeah,
too.
right.
But let's discuss the negatives.
But so in the negatives, so you would start, I would guess like what the easiest thing that you would be starting to do is, okay, if you think about something and there is a negative default in there, starting to prepare yourself. Every time I have that, what am I going to do about it? What's the trigger?
Maybe you think of an exception. Maybe you find the opposite of that.
Or you go, wait a minute.
Or you dig deeper and you look and see there's much more below the surface.
If I'm compassionate, would I have that same thought?
Yes.
If I'm in my compassionate mode, would I have that same thought?
Exactly. And is this person that I'm judging really that different from me?
Right.
Is there something in them that's triggering me to feel this judgment?
Yeah, and that's true. Even like with, say, like religions. Mm-hmm. If you look at another religion, people have a tendency to think, my religion is right, whatever it is, and other religions, not so right.
Mm-hmm.
But
everyone feels like theirs is the right way because that's what they resonate with. That's what they feel. But there is no right or wrong when it comes to religion. There is no... And
most religions, from what I know of it, have at their core, they really are the exact same thing.
Exactly.
They have this one person, whether you call God or Allah or Buddha or the universe or whatever you want to call this deity person, and that person says, be good to your fellow people. And then you start adding layers and
rules and then man kind of wants some
and then they really screw it up. But after that, no.
And that's the same thing with crossing cultures too. Right now there's so much going on with judgment of various cultures, various races, all kinds of huge groups of people that are being lumped in under 5 key phrases that people will say, well, this whole center of people is about these 5, exactly, that shortcut in the brain.
That's the shortcut.
And there are so many more things than that.
It's funny when you say that, the idea of like, I was noticing on the news, like when I do my best to not watch the news really, but I had been watching something and it was actually good news for a change, and they still did something, and it really, because it was good news, it kind of rang a bell for me. And they were like, oh yeah, so this is a good thing, and the Democrats think X and the Republicans think Y. And I went, I think that's part of where we've gone wrong. There are Democrats that think that, but there are also Democrats that don't.
Think that.
And there are Republicans that think that, and there are Republicans that don't. And we used to, if I remember right, the news used to say, Democratic person so-and-so thinks this. Republican whoever thinks that. They used to give a person's, not a group's idea. And to me, that's you're pushing and forcing all the time judged groups as a group, and they're not. None of them are. You know, yes, there are some people that there are some similarities, which is why we group them, but they're not the same person.
Exactly, yeah. I had an interesting, a different variation of that. I had a lot of friends in Phoenix who were gay, and some of them would harshly judge the drag queens, when you would think that, you know, you would be in this smaller circle of people
So
together.
you would hold-
One would
yeah.
expect maybe that they would all be compassionate of each other. And that's a judgment in and of itself.
Of course.
So there's all these layers of judgment that
Yeah.
can occur. And,
Yeah.
and that happens in every micro and macrocosm. So
Yeah.
how do you pull yourself out?
So how do you not do
How
that?
do you recognize when you're doing it? So often I think we judge things and people don't even realize that we're doing it. And then
Yeah.
you get all the superficial judgments of people saying, oh, well, that person's not wearing the right shoes. Their clothes are worn out. Can you imagine the car that they're in? You know, just like all these little
Yeah.
superficial things.
Yeah.
Do we really even care?
There you go.
Why do
No.
people care?
Yeah.
Why does this matter to people that they would make a judgment like that?
Which is that comes back to the ego, I believe.
Absolutely.
And that's where, yeah.
Absolutely. So one of the first things to do when you're releasing judgment is to recognize that we're all human.
Yep.
We're all the same.
They,
when it comes down
they
to
are
it,
you.
if you're taking this into a cultural thing, every single person has the same things they care about. They want their families to be safe. They want to have food on the table. They want to be able to make it happily to the next day. We want to have the basic things for survival. We're all the same in that.
Yep.
A lot of the details can vary. That's what makes life exciting, though,
Yeah.
is that everyone is different. How dull would it be if we were
all the same. I know. It'd be horrible.
It would be a pretty blah picture of the world if we all had the same likes and the same thoughts. And
Yeah.
so value, cherish those differences in other people. Maybe even take it the next step and learn about those. Figure out if something makes you uncomfortable and you feel like it's not something you like, try it on for a change
Yeah.
instead.
That's
See
right.
how that feels on you.
'Cause
And
Because comfort is a huge thing.
huge aspect
What
of
I
judgment.
feel comfortable with, and we've really pushed that in society, that
Yes.
the society should make you comfortable, and I don't think that's true. I
Right.
mean, I think people should be nice to each other, but at the same time, if you're comfortable all day long, something's wrong. Because there's just something wrong.
Yeah.
The world is not comfortable to live in.
And that's one of the things I do a lot with my students. I'll push them a little bit past their comfort
Yeah.
zone. I'll just give that challenge line. Once they meet it, challenge them just a little bit more.
Yeah.
We do that with cats too, with cat training. The
Yep.
way you help a shy cat to come out of their shell. You
Push
find
'em.
their challenge line and you push them just
Yep.
a little bit.
Yep.
You give them the nurturing, the love,
Yeah.
push them a little bit more.
It's
And then-
it's a safe place, but you still should step out of your comfort zone.
Yes,
But
exactly.
if you-
You're opening that
Yeah.
safety net, releasing the walls
Yeah.
down when you do that.
Yeah.
A lot of judgment, I think, comes from having walls up and just being afraid in general. Fear is one of the most dangerous things, I think, to society and to individuals. When you're
As a whole.
afraid of something, then you're not seeing what's on the other side of it clearly, because your own filters, your own thought processes are getting in the way of being able to see it. So if you feel like you're judging someone, whether it's a group or a person individually, and there's any kind of spark of fear in there, then it might be good to question, where's this judgment coming from?
Am I doing this wrong?
Is it
Yeah.
coming from my comfort zone?
Yeah.
Do they just seem that different from me? And why do they seem different? And why would that not be okay with me?
Yeah.
Again, pulling back and recognizing we're all humans. We're all in this together. There's nothing that separates me from any of you. There's
That's
nothing that
one,
separates
yeah.
you from any of your neighbors, anybody on any side of any border, anybody.
Anywhere on the planet, short of the environment that you were raised in.
Yeah, and that's nothing to judge. And so when you judge others, you're really judging yourself. It's really like putting a mirror up.
Yeah.
We talked about this a long time ago with people that trigger you. Sometimes you might meet that person, or you might have that person in your life that just drives you crazy. You're like, why do I have to deal with this person? Their coworker, why is it every day? What did I do?
There's something about that they do that just pushes that button
Sometimes
over and
it's
over
family,
again.
sometimes it's
Yep.
just people in your life. And when we did that life talk, we talked about it being a mirror for yourself.
Yeah.
So what are you seeing in them that's driving you crazy, and how do those aspects apply to yourself?
Yeah.
More often than not, there's something that's going to be a fit for yourself in it that's a trigger.
That's a
Maybe it's
parallel.
something that you've needed to heal within yourself. Maybe there's some kind of trauma that occurred,
Yeah.
or maybe you're just like them and you're not realizing it, and seeing them makes that kind of come up within you. I've seen that so many times where people will say, this person drives me crazy, and you're like, they're just like you.
But
What do you mean?
But that's you. Yeah, they go, can
No,
you believe
what
they
do you
do blah, blah,
mean?
blah? And you go, yeah, I really hate it when people do that. Like, you do all the time? Really? Okay.
But so recognize it. Look at it as a mirror and see. And if you feel like, even if you look at it and you feel like they're vastly different than you, figure out what things you do have in common with them, and what things where you have
'Cause
common ground.
There's always common ground.
And then start to recognize the beauty of the difference. Again, this world would be very dull if we didn't have color in the world. If everything was gray in the world, it wouldn't.
Well, and that's and people try to come up with the concept of like normal, average, ordinary.
Right.
And there's not a single person on this planet
It's completely normal.
that is exactly
Or average.
like any other person. So how can you find normal when there's no two people that are exactly alike?
Comes right back to comfort zone.
That's what, yeah, I mean, there's just...
Which is individual.
You pick a group of things, and yeah, you might be able to find people that have some of the same likes in those small group of things. That's it. That's the closest you can get to normal.
So when you judge others, you're really judging yourself.
Absolutely.
Because we're all one in this planet. And another thing that comes with judgment is the fear that others are judging you. Oftentimes people will lash out with judgments because they're afraid that other people might be judging them, and so
Absolutely.
they have those walls. If I judge you first and I just put this wall, then whatever you say won't hurt me
That's
so
that
much.
self-confidence. The minute that your self-confidence starts shaking,
Exactly.
because that fear comes into play.
And often that's where that shallower level of judgment comes
Is
in
from the
too,
fear,
I think.
absolutely,
The
yeah.
socioeconomic, or the not wearing the latest trends, or
Yes.
the, whatever.
That's what, yeah,
Life is too short for that.
it is.
And each and every one of you as individuals, to be the one to stand up, to stop the judgment, and to share the love, to feel the compassion instead. Make a compliment. You might feel like it's hard to find a compliment. There's always something that you can compliment with somebody.
no doubt,
Instead
yes,
of tearing them
always,
down,
always.
pull out the compassion, pull out the Buddhahood within yourself, and find a way to say a compliment and to
To what?
compassionate nature.
Okay.
Your Buddhahood.
Buddha hood. I thought you said Buddha head. Pull out the Buddha head.
Buddha.
Am I wrong? Okay, good. I'm glad I'm
sure.
wrong, because that seemed really
We're
good.
judging.
Okay, Buddhahood, I like it. Let's go with that.
So, finding that compassion. And compassion will always trump over fear. Love will always land over hate. It's the way we have this balance
Can
of
be.
things in the world. And so it's what you choose. It's
Yeah.
what you focus on that can raise your vibration
Yeah.
and make your life better.
Yeah, it can. I mean, if you use the love, it can fix all of the hate, for sure.
Yes, and we're all different. Each and every one of us are different, as you just mentioned. There's no average. So and because life would be so dull if we didn't have those differences. And so how can you really cherish and honor those differences instead? What are you afraid of when you're judging? there's a few things you can think of with that too. First, how does it relate to you, as I mentioned? And then really trying to dive deeper into that. So maybe it was childhood. Is there something from your childhood? You mentioned right in the beginning that some of those shortcuts are ingrained in our heads. And
It's
so
from a child.
you might have judgments in your head that
Yeah.
you've just taken for granted because your parents always talked a certain way about certain things. And so you took that as truth. And then you grew up and the people around you feel that same way. And
Yeah.
so you just speak those same words,
Yeah.
not even thinking about it, not thinking about the impact that it has on other people and
Yeah.
their lives.
Yeah.
And just,
Well, and that's where, like, I was, as a, just an analogy of, like, if, let's say so you're raised in a religious environment, and in that religion, say they specifically don't like, let's say, gays. So you're raised, and you know you go through your whole life. All of your social people, everybody you've been around, your church, everybody, they all believe that. And then as you get older, you become like a grandparent, and then you have this granddaughter, and you love this granddaughter more than words. And then that granddaughter ends up being gay. And now it's in your face.
Right.
Now you have to question.
I've seen
Now you
this
have to
many
go.
times with
Now you
people.
have to go, wait a minute. Could I have been wrong?
Mm-hmm.
And if you're smart about it, you go,
maybe I was wrong.
hopefully I'm wrong, and then, but you have to engage that. You have to, those are those situations. You're now out of your comfort zone.
Mm-hmm.
You're now in a situation that you thought, and this is most religions, not most religions, like in this specific one, they would consider it, let's say, like a sinner. And I think I was actually thinking about, it's so funny, the word sinner, like when I hear the word sinner, and I'm so not ever been really religious, but even I hear sinner and I think of this, it's this horrible person. I mean, it's just as a default, horrible person, sinner. And then I go, but then you go, and then you think of any specific thing that they consider a sin. Well, almost all the sins. And most of us, we either do it or we accept almost everything they considered sin or being a born sinner, and you just kind of go, oh, I guess it's not horrible in any stretch. But anyway, okay, I digress. But diving into those situations where you realize that you could be wrong, you have to accept that you're wrong, and then the best thing in the world you can do is, if it's something that actually you feel like you want to overcome, the best thing you can do is actually educate yourself. You go and you learn about whatever it is that makes you uncomfortable. Just the simple act of learning changes everything.
Yes.
And that's what's so nice. That's what's so nice about being a human, is that we actually have the option to learn and rewrite.
And being able to admit when you're wrong about it too. Maybe you felt a certain way for many, many years throughout your whole life, and suddenly it might have been a personal experience, as you mentioned, with the granddaughter who comes out and feeling like that challenges that compassion. And you realize that, okay, not only do I love my granddaughter, but maybe I was wrong about all of this.
Yeah.
And then sometimes you can even look into, just look at people and realize that that person you're judging is someone's granddaughter. It's someone's child. Someone loves that person. And how am I doing any different from being their mother or their father? I tend to see everybody in the world as my kids. But it's probably a little unique.
You're all their children.
Yes. And so, but when you do that, when you see through those eyes, you see the innocence, the wonder, the delight, the joy, the beauty in everybody, and you start to realize we're all an extension of each other too.
That's exactly right. Yes.
Truly,
Yeah.
there's nothing really at the core that separates us. We all come from the same spark of divine light. We come down here for many different experiences. I'm not one to judge what anybody's experiences are. And when you do that, there's a big sense of freedom that comes in that too, because you realize that you can take part in the joy that other people are having. Or if other people are in samsara, suffering, you can realize that they're in a state where they might need a little bit of help. They need some extra compassion. They need a little bit of a guiding light possibly, and you can be that. You can help that if they want it. Again, it's not about judging and forcing that, but
so
you can
you want them to
offer
not
it.
only overcome the judging, you want them to be the light that
I
overcomes
do.
all judging.
Yes.
You have very high standards.
And I believe in everybody for this too. If I can do it, you can do it. There's nothing that separates
I
us.
agree with you, and I absolutely can.
Find the way to change your brain pattern. Find the way to reprogram your mind so that you release that judgment. The key, I think, to releasing that flash of judgment that just comes in and you go, wait, I'm not judging, that's not a thought, let me clear that out, is really, I think the key of that is pulling out the compassion. Really seeing that everybody is an extension of yourself.
And I'm a true believer in habit.
Yes, that's the biggest thing.
I'm
And
a
it
true believer
takes
in
a
that.
lot for
It
people
does.
sometimes to overcome the first part of it, of
Yep.
just releasing those judgmental thoughts.
Absolutely.
It takes the same amount of work to release that flash of judgment too, but once it becomes a habit, and once instead of that you're always reading that compassion, then that becomes a habit, and the rest just, you wonder how people do that. Why do they... How does the thought of judgment come in, and you have to work at it from the back angle instead? So it definitely is possible.
I think, yeah, but I think for most people, I think it is in all instances, well, not all, in some instances, there will always be a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
I think not judging groups and concepts and even stuff that specifically that we're ignorant of, because we can't know everything. You know,
That's a big part of it.
we can't know everything. And so when you're ignorant of something, you can only go with what little you've learned, and by default, that is kind of judging, because it's judging from a stance of ignorance.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that will always be a challenge, but I think that's, the trick is learning the habit of, am I starting from compassion, and do I know enough to even make a decision or a thought about it?
See you next week. If you want to make sure you don't miss the video, please hit the subscribe button on YouTube, hit the like button on
Ring the
our
little bell.
Facebook page. Yes, the
Little
bell
bell.
icon. That will
Yeah.
notify you whenever we come out with these new videos every week. Thank you so much. Have a great week.